Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great. Today I want to share with you my Fujifilm XE-4 settings for travel photography. Today I'm going to break down my technical settings like my custom buttons, my focus settings, and in another video down the line I'll talk more about the video and also how I use the camera day to day. If stuff like that sounds interesting to you, be sure to give this video a like or even subscribe for more. And I'm also in the process of putting together a digital zine from one of my trips. So if you are interested in something like that, be sure to sign up to my newsletter below and you can get a bit more info about the upcoming sale of that. So if we jump right into the settings, let's first talk about how I actually shoot. If you've followed my work for a while, you know that I love to shoot candid moments while I'm out traveling. I like to have a bit of a balance between travel and street photography, so a lot of the shots I'm getting are on the go, and that's why I like to have my camera set up as easy as possible. If you're a beginner or someone who's just picked up a Fujifilm camera, this is really good for you because my camera is set up as easy as possible in my opinion, as I like to make sure I don't miss too many shots or fiddle with my settings when I'm out and about. In saying this, I found that shooting in Aperture Priority to be the best way for me to work, and it's the way I get the most photos that I'm super happy with. So if you are new to photography, Aperture Priority involves you selecting the aperture and you let the camera decide the ISO and the shutter speed. This means as a photographer, you don't need to focus on your shutter speed and ISO, you let the camera decide about that, and all you need to do is choose your aperture based on the type of photo you're trying to capture. To set up Aperture Priority on the XE-4, like many Fujifilm cameras, you're gonna turn the dial of the shutter to the letter A, and then you're also gonna go into your ISO settings and turn that to A as well. ISO settings has a bunch of auto brackets we're going to talk about a little bit later, but if you click on one of those, that's going to make sure your camera is in Aperture Priority. Now it's simply up to you as the photographer to choose your aperture. So if you're taking a portrait, I would recommend sticking around f2, f2.8. However, if you decide to take a landscape photo, you can bump the aperture up and shoot around f8 or something like that. This just means you can have more in focus with a landscape as opposed to f2, f2.8 where more of the background is going to be blurred. By only having to worry about the aperture, I can then focus on shots in front of me and I'm not going to spend too much time balancing my settings. The XE-4 does a really great job of managing Aperture Priority, so it's something I would recommend if you're starting out or you are someone who does like those candid moments. This obviously isn't total manual mode and you might get a few people questioning that, but to be honest, as long as you're enjoying taking photos and getting the ones you want, set up your camera however you want, and that's how I do it. So coming off my style of shooting, I do like to rely on the autofocus system that the XE-4 offers. I can't say I use manual focus at all purely because my style is a bit run and gun, so I do rely on the continuous autofocus setting the most and sometimes a single shot autofocus. Continuous autofocus involves the camera constantly adjusting focus based on the scene in front of it. Alternatively, I do sometimes use the single shot autofocus, but not so much, but this involves holding the shutter down halfway and then you can recompose as the camera will hold that focus point for you. Both are great options, but I would say I stick with the continuous autofocus the most. And along with this, I do have my eye autofocus switched on. This just makes sure when I'm shooting portraits, I'm making sure everything is in focus perfectly. And also if I'm photographing people from a distance, I give myself and the camera the best opportunity at capturing something in frame. This is an upgrade for me compared to the X100F that I used to use a lot. That didn't have eye tracking and I'm really noticing a benefit to that when I'm actually out shooting with this camera, so that's a big plus if you're new to this system. Following on from this, I do use zone focusing with this camera. That lets me use the joystick on the right hand side to pick what part of the frame I want in focus. It's a big box that pops up on the back of the screen and I found it to be the most useful as opposed to center or single point focusing. I think the zone focusing is a really good option, especially if you're starting out and you want different parts of your frame in focus. So with zone focusing and continuous autofocus, I give myself a really great chance at getting all the photos I want when I'm out and about running and gunning, not looking too much at my camera. Next, if we talk about film simulations on the XE-4 are really great to use, and it's a big reason I know a lot of people come to the Fujifilm system. I don't use the film simulations as much as I should, but on this trip I did use them quite a lot because I was taking a lot of photos of friends and family, and it meant I didn't need to edit all of these photos because the shots straight out of camera looked incredible. All of the photos you see here on YouTube or on my Instagram have been edited RAWs from the XE-4. That's why I shoot with both the Fujifilm RAW and Fine option, which lets me shoot in both JPEG and RAW. With the JPEGs, the film simulations are going to be built into the photos, whereas the RAWs are going to have a lot more flexibility when it comes to editing. JPEGs don't require much editing, although you can do some on your phone, whereas if you do shoot in RAW, you're going to need some software like Lightroom or Photoshop. That's why by having both JPEG and RAW shooting switched on in my XE-4, I give myself the flexibility when it comes to sharing my photos. I can send off the nice JPEGs to my friends without having to edit all of them, and also make sure any great photos I can spend some time on editing/sharing. You do have the option to create your own film simulations by customizing some of them, but I haven't gone ahead and done that. So if you do have any suggestions for me, leave a comment below, or even a link to something that you might like, because I'd be really keen to try it out. My favorite film simulation to shoot with in camera is Astia's Soft. That's something that I would recommend you trying out, because to me it looks the most soft and the most natural, but all of them do a really great job at looking great, so I would recommend just giving it a crack. One really unique thing about Fujifilm and Lightroom, for example, is that you can use the simulations as a bit of a base when editing. So if you head into Lightroom, you can click this little box here, and that will open up all the film simulations from Fujifilm that you can apply to the RAW. So that gives you a nice starting point if you do like the simulations. Like I mentioned, given that I shoot in Aperture Priority, I am giving my camera responsibility to sort out my ISO and my shutter speed. However, one of the great things about the XE-4 is that you're given 3 options to customize your ISO, even when you are shooting in Aperture or Shutter Priority. You can customize these even more so if you'd like, but you've got Auto 1, 2, and 3, and this gives you a minimum and a maximum ISO sensitivity. So this gives you a bit more flexibility when you are shooting in Aperture Priority to make sure that your camera chooses the right ISO. For example, if you're out shooting in the middle of the day, I would recommend having your camera into Auto ISO 1. This is the lower bracket, and make sure your camera doesn't choose an ISO setting above the maximum you've chosen. In my case, the Auto 1 ISO max sensitivity is 400, so when I am in Auto 1 and in Aperture Priority, the camera isn't going to put the ISO above 400. Alternatively, when the sun starts to set, I might put it into Auto 2, and that gives me a bit more flexibility, and the camera can go up to 3200. I would rarely set my ISO into Auto 3 purely because the XE-4 isn't fantastic in low light, something I've noticed, and it's not a major problem because a lot of the shots I'm getting are out during the day on the street while I'm traveling, so that's something that's not a major problem, and that's why I wouldn't really go into Auto ISO 3. So throughout this video, you would have seen me jumping through the camera settings, but one of the things I love about the XE-4 is the ability to customize it. Now, whilst the XE-4 doesn't have the most custom buttons as opposed to last cameras, even my X100F, the XE-4 can be set to, really make sure that you do have your custom buttons or your settings available, even without too many buttons on the body. For example, as we just spoke about ISO, if you hit this little button up here, I've got that set to be my ISO. I think that's a really great and accessible spot, and I like ISO having its own setting as opposed to anything else, purely because I think it's an important setting and it deserves its own button, and I don't want to be fiddling through the menus trying to find my ISO. Next, when I hit the menu button, it's going to pop up with a My Menu setting that you might not see on your camera, and that's because I've customized this page to include all of the settings that I really want to be there. To set up your My Menu, head to the wrench icon and then go to User Setting, and then if you scroll down and hit the Camera My Menu setting, this lets you add items, rank items, and remove items for this My Menu page. Now, once you've added in your favorite custom settings and you hit the menu button, it's going to go straight to this My Menu, making them really quick and easy to access. You can also customize the touchscreen of your XE-4 by swiping left and right and up and down, but I haven't gotten into that too much because oftentimes the camera's with me walking on my side and the touchscreen can get a bit sensitive, so I turn the touchscreen off when I don't need it, but I do have it accessible should I need it. You also have the ability to customize these buttons up here, but that's something I haven't really dived into too much for the same reasons, but I just like how the rest is set up, and the My Menu system is good for me. Having the My Menu system set up like I have means that all of the settings I want are in one place. They're not spread out throughout the camera and I need to remember which buttons they are. Having them all on one screen in one place makes things a lot easier for me, and it's just how I like to shoot. And so to explain why my Menu is set up the way I have it, it might give you some inspiration to set yours up, but I have the film simulation at the top because I like to change between that for the JPEGs. The focus mode, like I mentioned earlier, is about the continuous and single shot I like to swap between, so that's there too. The autofocus mode, for the same reason, I like to try between zone and wide, more so for landscapes and people. Framing guidelines lets me change the grids. The autofocus illuminator is a really great system to turn on and off. Sometimes if you're out shooting and you don't want people to see that you're shooting, you're trying to be candid or discreet, your camera can show a lot of light, so turning the autofocus illuminator on or off gives you a bit more discretion there. Next, I have my touchscreen on and off so it doesn't change too many settings while I'm out walking. Next, I've got the shutter type. This is a really important setting for me because oftentimes when I'm out shooting, like I mentioned, I want to be discreet and candid. And so having a mechanical shutter makes a bit of noise, and the XE-4 does have a really nice sound, but oftentimes I don't want people or my friends to know that I'm taking photos of them. So being able to swap between the electronic shutter and the mechanical shutter is a really good setting to have in my menu. And finally, I've got my eye detection on or off. I like to change this because sometimes I want to capture a photo of a body or someone moving, and that isn't always meaning that I want their face/eye in focus. So that's a setting I have there. It's not something I change too much, but it's just handy having it right in my menu. And lastly, when it comes to customizing, you can use your Q menu to set up a variety of different profiles. This lets you customize a bunch of different things into different user settings. I don't use the Q menu that much because I like to shoot the same way most of the time, and the My menu really helps me change between them. But having the Q button right here is very handy should you want to change between different options. So that's something I would recommend to people who shoot in different scenarios and different locations, meaning that you've got your settings all organized and you don't need to fiddle around too much each time you change it around and shoot something new. And so overall, that is pretty much my setup in a nutshell. The XE-4 is a really great camera for travel photography. You would hear me rave about it in past videos, and even moving forward in the videos I've got planned, the XE-4 really exceeded my expectations. I hope this video has given a bit more guidance into how to set this camera up to make it a bit easier to use. I understand that if you are moving to the Fuji system, it can be a bit overwhelming. And also if you're just new to photography, not knowing how to set this camera up can be a bit daunting. Like I said, I like to have my camera as easy as possible to use. So I think shooting in Aperture Priority is a really great start for you. And also having a My menu setting that lets you change the key settings for you is also really valuable to shooting. I'm sure the more I use this camera, the more I am gonna find settings that I wanna change/update, and also different things that I can customize, like different simulations and also my JPEGs coming out right out of camera. So if you do have any suggestions, be sure to leave them below. But overall, for me, having this camera for 3 months, 4 months now, that's how I like to shoot, and that's how I've got it set up. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you could like this video, subscribe, that would be fantastic. I'll be doing a few more videos on my video settings, along with how I actually use this camera when traveling. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.